Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be testing Yukong and putting her head to head with Ting Yun and seeing who performs better in Endgame. A lot of people say Yukong is insane, but some other people say she's not that good. Well, we're going to have a pretty good idea of exactly how viable she is after we go through the test results. Let's get into it. Yukong has a lot of things the community is a bit split on, whether or not to build speed on her or not, whether to invest fully into energy recharge and supporting or go sub DPS, and finally exactly how to use her main ability, Roaring Bowstrings, and how to fit it into combat. We're going to be talking about all these things and touching on them throughout the video and going over them more at the end. So in order to compare Ting Yun and Yukong and understand how much benefit each of them are granting our teams, we're going to run the following test. We're going to head over to Memory of Chaos 10 and complete the first side with a number of different teams and combinations and see which team can complete it fastest. We're going to run a team with Clara, 5 main character, and Luocha with 3 players and no supports. Then we're going to add in Yukong and see how much faster she makes it. Then we'll take Yukong out and put in Ting Yun and we'll compare all 3 results. What this should allow us to do is see how fast a character is by themselves, with Yukong, and then with Ting Yun. And then to make sure that we don't have any RNG, we're going to run each test for each character a number of times and just use the one that is best. And then we're going to compare them all. The characters we're going to do this for are Clara, Seele, and Jing Yuan, to try and get a bit of a variety there. We're going to Destruction, Erudition, and Hunt character. So they're all going to be tested by themselves with Ting Yun and then with Yukong. Before we get into the results and tests though, let's take a look at our competitors and see how I built them. The first point I want to make here is that my Yukong is only idle on 2 and my Ting Yun is idle on 6. So what we're going to be learning from this test is whether or not Yukong has the potential to be as strong as Ting Yun at any point in the future as she gets more and more Eidolons. We can't really compare her directly to Ting Yun in these tests because Ting Yun has more Eidolons and Yukong gets a lot from her Eidolons. So if she's even remotely close at all or does substantially better than the characters without a support, that is what we're going to be looking at here. So with the Eidolons out of the way, let's take a look at how I built her. There is a number of different ways you can build Yukong. You can build her maximum speed, you can build her without any speed at all. You can also build her with damage or no damage at all and a lot of energy recharge. I decided to go ahead and build Yukong maximum speed with energy recharge, ignoring damage. And we'll get into why I did that at the end and how that also worked for me. So we've got 4-piece Musketeer of Wild Wheat, and we've also got Fleet of the Ageless, focusing on speed stats pretty much everywhere, and a few damage subsets when I can get it. But for the most part, we're just doing speed and energy recharge. I'm also using Meshing of Cogs, which is only level 60 instead of 80, so there's definitely a lot of room to improve Yukong's build, her playstyle through Eidolons, and a lot of wiggle room to make her go a sub DPS route. What I'm getting at here is that Yukong in this test is not at her full potential. We're going to get a good idea of how strong she'll be, but she has a lot of room to grow here. Next up is Ting Yun here, who is pretty much built the same way. We've got maximum speed with 4-piece Wild Wheat and Fleet of the Ageless. We've got some pretty good energy recharge on there, but the main difference is of course those Eidolons and a little bit more investment on her traces. So she's got level 9 of her skill here instead of level 7 like Yukong. And in addition to that, she also has her Eidolon. So Ting Yun is definitely got pretty similar relics, but she is ahead in terms of the investment and the Eidolon. So we're definitely going to remember that. And instead of using energy recharge, Ting Yun here is using a dance light cone. So we've got a few differences there. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how this plays out. So let's put them head to head, and of course mentally handicap Ting Yun a little bit in our mind when we get to the results. Let's dive into it. So the first character I wanted to see who would be better for is Hyper Carry Clara, a character who has definitely become a lot more popular with the release of Luocha and the invincible teams that he can enable her. So let's understand who's better, Yukong or Tingyun. But first though, we need to establish a control test. We need to see how many cycles Clara would take by herself without any characters helping her. So what we've got here is we've got a team of Clara, Luocha, and 5 main character. We're going to take them into Memory of Chaos side 1 here. We're going to wipe it out and see how long she takes. And that's exactly what we did. With this 3-man team here, it took Clara solo 11 cycles on her best attempt here to wipe out the enemies, which is definitely not fast, but it's definitely not slow either. Let's find out how much Tingyun and Yukong can speed this up. So first up is the tried and true combo of Tingyun and Clara. Without dwelling on it too much, it was a massive improvement, going from 11 cycles solo down to just 5 cycles with Tingyun. And that was a smooth 5 cycles, pretty much every attempt with 5 or 6 cycles, so it was definitely very, very consistent. Next up is Clara Yukong. So Yukong Clara is a pretty hyped up combo, with a lot of people saying this is one of the better combinations with Yukong, and I'm inclined to agree. Overall, the reason that Clara and Yukong feel so good and has so much power, I think, is because Yukong is a little bit awkward to use normally, but with Clara she becomes a little bit less awkward. And the reason for that is that you can either use Yukong's Roaring Bowstrings to buff Clara, or you can use Roaring Bowstrings right before the enemy moves to buff Clara when she's counterattacking, and both of them are viable options. The cool thing about this is that in Memory of Chaos, chances are there's either going to be Clara within 2 actions of you, or there's going to be some enemies that are going to be attacking within 2 actions of you, making Yukong feel a lot more consistent than she does with other characters, which definitely is a welcome thing here. Now, it's not all smooth sailing though. Now, while it is very strong, while she does have a lot of power here, I would say that it is vastly less consistent than Tingyun. So my best run with Yukong and Clara was actually 6 cycles. So solo Clara was 11, with Tingyun 5, and my best run with Yukong was 6. However, that was not consistent. I had a number of runs which were 7 and 8 cycles long. So if you wanted to take the average, it'd probably be closer to 7, but my best run was indeed 6 cycles, which you're seeing in the background here. So Yukong and Clara, definitely a powerhouse combo, and I think if you combined the fact that we've got, maybe not a perfectly built Yukong with the fact that we don't have the Eidolons, I'd say they're pretty damn close in terms of performance, but we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. So next up on the testing docket here is Seele. So my Seele is pretty damn invested, being E2 with her signature light cone at S1, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see how a super duper strong character already scales with either Tingyun or Yukong. First up, of course, is understanding how strong Seele is by herself, accompanied by 5 main character and Luocha. In Memory of Chaos 10, she was able to get side 1 done by herself in just 6 cycles. Pretty quick, so let's find out how much Tingyun and Yukong can bring to the table for her. So a combo we all know and love, Seele plus Tingyun was able to get side 1 done in just 2 cycles. Now that is impressive because we started out with 6 cycles and went down to 2. That is cutting 66% off the time. We have to see if Yukong can match that. So Seele and Yukong actually have quite a lot of synergy with one another. The reason for this is when you use Roaring Bowstrings and you trigger Resurgence, which is the extra on-kill effect to go on a kill streak, you can actually extend Seele's turn, and each one of those extensions will maintain Roaring Bowstrings, allowing you to effectively cheat out a bunch of extra skills and ultimates within the 2-action window of Yukong's Bowstrings, which is a big deal. In addition to that, you can also use Roaring Bowstrings, and even if Seele is not within the next 2 actions, you can activate her ultimate in that window, kill something, and then go on the killing spree again, and get all of that in Yukong's window as well. So they're definitely a very good combo. In addition to that, also Seele has a lot of speed modulation in her kit. So even if you end up moving out of the window which Yukong can buff in with her emboldening salvo, you can actually get straight back into it, fortunately, with Seele, thanks to her speed buff, first and foremost on her skill, but most importantly her basic attack. Her basic attack with all of her Ascension bonuses unlocked actually grants her 20% action forward, meaning that she can move in and out of the bowstring range pretty easily by using a few basic attacks here and there. Now similarly, this can force you to go out of the range of bowstrings, but it definitely does give you a lot more control over being inside of the range of Yukong and not when you really need it most. Especially when Yukong's ultimate is up, you definitely want to get inside that range there and try and line everything up, and Seele's basic attack can really help with that. So the best run I got with Seele and Yukong was actually clearing the first side of Memory of Chaos 10 in 3 cycles, and this actually was pretty consistent, unlike the Clara runs. I was able to consistently get 3 or 4 cycle clears with this combo. So Seele by herself is 6 cycles, with Yukong 3 cycles, and with Tingyun 2 cycles, so those are pretty damn close. Yukong is putting in some work for the amount of investment she's got available to her. The last character I tested with is Jing Yuan, who is as equally invested as my Seele, but is a lot more touchy with the support he wants to use. He definitely wants to be paired with Tingyun, so it'll be interesting to see how he does with Yukong. Of course, we've got the speed build, big attack, big crit, and big critical strike damage with his signature, and we've got 2 Eidolons on him to boot. Alright, first things first though, we need to understand how good Jing is by himself so we can see how good the supports are with him. So Memory of Chaos 10 side 1 has a lot of crowd control and slows, which isn't particularly nice for Jing. He'd prefer not to have to deal with those. But nonetheless, he got it done in 10 cycles, which is definitely a pretty good baseline here. So the question is going to be how the Tingyun and Yukong are going to increase that damage and by how much. So first up to test is Jing Yuan plus Tingyun, 2 characters that seemingly were made for each other, and definitely seems that way with the results. So Jing Yuan plus Tingyun were able to clear out Memory of Chaos side 1 in just 5 cycles, but that is to be expected. Let's see how Yukong is able to stack up. Alright, so the final test to discuss here is Jing Yuan plus Yukong, which was actually the hardest combo I've had to test yet. And the reason for this is that we don't have any easy way to enable Yukong's emboldening salvo and roaring bowstrings like the last 2 carries that we were playing with. With Clara, we were able to use emboldening salvo before Clara attacked or before the enemies attacked. With Seele, we had her speed modulation, with her skill, and with her basic attack. So we were able to move Seele around in the turn order as we needed to get within emboldening salvo range. But with Jing Yuan, we don't have any such tools, and we don't have any such easy things we can use emboldening salvo before. And in addition to that, we actually have to hit a moving target, and that moving target is the Lightning Lord. And it proved pretty difficult for me to buff. So most of the damage of Jing comes from his Lightning Lord, and ideally you'd be using emboldening salvo right before the Lightning Lord striked, and you'd hopefully have her ultimate up as well. But it just was very difficult for me to achieve that. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's because the Lightning Lord is slow, maybe because the Lightning Lord is constantly moving all over the place in terms of its turn order, but I had a really tough time buffing the Lightning Lord. Maybe slow Yukong or different speed values or something along those lines would make it easier, but it definitely wasn't easy for me. So the result I ended up getting with Jing Yuan with Yukong was 7 cycles. So Jing Yuan solo was 10 and Tingyun was 5, so that's actually still a pretty good result, even though I had a lot of trouble playing this combo. And I think it's only going to get easier as you get higher Eidolon levels of Yukong. So let's round all this up and discuss how good Yukong actually is. Alright, so the question is Yukong any good? Is she competitive? Is she worth investing into? Well, when I initially saw Yukong's kit, I thought it was pretty bad. I was like, this is just a bad version of Tingyun with a bunch of conditionals. I'm not interested in this. I don't think it's going to be any good. And then I got my hands on her, and I played around with her, and I was like, man, this feels awful to play. This is just a worse version of Tingyun. And then I did these tests, and I was quite frankly shocked by how effective she actually ended up being. When looking at the results, it's clear that she is a competitive option, and we're comparing E2 Yukong up to E6. Now the thing with Yukong though is that these are her best runs, and we're comparing it to Tingyun's best runs as well. And I can say for a fact that Yukong had much less consistent runs. The runs that we had were kind of 1 out of 5 or 6 runs, where the other runs were worse, but all of Tingyun's runs were pretty much the same. So she's definitely powerful, but she's a lot less consistent. So with all that said, I definitely think Yukong is a pretty reasonable character to consider building if you like her playstyle. Even though it's not for me, it might be for you, and she definitely does seem strong based on our test results here. In addition to that, my Yukong definitely has a lot more room to grow, whereas my Tingyun doesn't really. We can definitely gear up our Yukong here to be a much better sub DPS, we can improve her light cone, we can re-atomize her relics, all without sacrificing too much of her supporting potential. In addition to that, it's possible the max speed variant I've gone with here isn't the best for all the teams I used. Maybe slow Yukong, maybe somewhere in the middle. It's possible there is a better build out there for her. And then finally, her Eidolons. Mostly her Eidolons are gonna make her so much more powerful and take her closer to where my Tingyun already was. There was many times in our fights, which we had in the tests here, where I felt like E6 would have made the world of difference. A lot of times I held onto my ultimate for multiple turns, just waiting for my carries to come around and for me to be able to use Emboldening Salvo within their range with the ultimate active. If I didn't have to wait, I could use it straight away, get way more ultimates, way more damage, and way more specific buff timing, really improving my team's potential. It also feels like the game really isn't ready for Yukong just yet. Her main skill Emboldening Salvo buffs up the next 2 characters in the turn order, and ideally you'd have them both be damaging characters. We haven't done any tests with that. And right now, people aren't generally running double damaging character compositions. But if there ever was a world where they did, Emboldening Salvo would get a lot stronger comparatively than what we've seen here. In addition to that, Yukong also has a pretty cool bonus ability that buffs up imaginary damage characters specifically. We also didn't do any imaginary damage tests here, because really the only damage character which is imaginary right now is Welt, and I actually don't have him. But if there ever is a world where Welt is incredibly powerful, or there's other future imaginary damaging characters, Yukong will be only more powerful with them than we've represented here. So it definitely does feel like Yukong does have a lot of potential. And when you activate E6, she basically becomes a completely different unit in my eyes. And if I had to answer the question on whether or not she's good and whether or not you should build her, before E6, I think she's going to be an acquired taste, but she's definitely pretty powerful if you can stick out the bad RNG and the differences in speed and tune her just right. After E6 though, I think she's a fully capable support and she's one of the best Harmony characters on the table right now, right up there with Tingyun, and honestly right up there with Bronya in terms of effective damage buffs. Now, she might not bring as much utility as Tingyun and Bronya thanks to their energy and boosting potentials respectively, but she certainly does bring the numbers. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to let the algorithm know it was worth watching by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Cheers.